The heavy rain battered the windows of the old, abandoned hospital, creating a cacophony of sounds that echoed through the empty hallways. Takashi and Yuki, childhood friends now in their late 20s, stood at the entrance of this dilapidated building, drenched and shivering. The air was thick with the smell of mold and decay, and a sense of unease settled over them as they took their first steps inside. "We shouldn't be here," Yuki whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind outside. Takashi, always the adventurous one, gave her a reassuring smile. "It's just for one night. We need to see if the rumors are true." The two friends had heard countless stories about the old hospital, abandoned for decades after a mysterious incident. Locals spoke of ghostly apparitions, strange noises, and most chillingly, the spectral presence of a nurse who roamed the halls, seeking something or someone. They made their way through the main lobby, their footsteps echoing eerily. The walls were covered in peeling paint, and the floor was littered with debris. A broken wheelchair lay on its side, its wheels still occasionally turning with the draft. Every creak and groan of the old building seemed amplified, making their hearts race. Takashi led Yuki down a long, dark corridor. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating old medical charts and broken equipment scattered about. The further they went, the colder it seemed to get. It felt as if the walls themselves were closing in on them. Finally, they reached the old surgical ward, the supposed epicenter of the haunting. The door creaked open, revealing an operating room that looked frozen in time. Rusty surgical instruments lay scattered across a table, and an old, stained operating lamp hung ominously from the ceiling. Takashi set up their makeshift camp in one corner of the room, spreading out their sleeping bags and setting up a small portable stove. Yuki sat on her sleeping bag, hugging her knees to her chest. "I really don't like this, Takashi. This place gives me the creeps." Takashi chuckled, though there was a nervous edge to it. "That's the whole point, isn't it? We're here to find out if the ghost stories are real." As night fell, the hospital seemed to come alive with sounds. The wind howled through broken windows, doors creaked on their hinges, and faint whispers seemed to float through the air. Takashi and Yuki sat in the dim light of their flashlight, the flickering shadows playing tricks on their eyes. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed down the corridor, making them both jump. Takashi grabbed his flashlight and stood up. "Stay here. I'm going to check it out." Yuki's eyes widened with fear. "Are you crazy? Don't leave me here alone." But Takashi was already moving towards the door. "I'll be right back. I promise." With a reluctant sigh, Yuki watched him disappear into the darkness. She sat there, heart pounding, every nerve on edge as the silence stretched on. Minutes felt like hours, and the oppressive darkness seemed to close in on her. Then, just as she was about to call out for Takashi, she heard a faint, melodic humming. It was soft at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder, echoing through the empty hallways. Yuki's breath caught in her throat. It sounded like a lullaby, soothing yet chilling. She stood up, clutching her flashlight, and took a hesitant step towards the door. "Takashi?" she called out, her voice trembling. There was no response, just the continued humming, growing ever closer. Yuki's mind raced with fear and confusion. She wanted to run, but her legs felt rooted to the spot. Suddenly, she saw a figure at the end of the corridor. A woman in an old-fashioned nurse's uniform, her face, obscured by shadows, stood there, humming softly. Yuki's blood turned to ice. The ghostly nurse. The stories were true. Before she could react, the figure began to move towards her, gliding silently over the floor. Panic surged through Yuki, and she stumbled back, tripping over her sleeping bag and falling to the ground. The flashlight slipped from her grasp, rolling away and plunging her into darkness. In the pitch black, Yuki could hear the humming growing louder closer. She crawled backwards, desperately trying to find the flashlight, her heart pounding in her chest, just as she felt the cold touch of the nurse's hand on her shoulder. The flashlight flickered back to life. The corridor was empty. The humming had stopped. Gasping for breath, Yuki scrambled to her feet, the flashlight beam shaking in her trembling hand. "Takashi!" she screamed, her voice echoing through the empty halls. There was no answer. Tears streamed down her face as she backed into the operating room. Slamming the door shut behind her, she huddled in the corner, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline, her mind racing. Where was Takashi? What was happening? The silence was oppressive, broken only by Yuki's ragged breathing. She had never felt so alone, so terrified. Hours seemed to pass as she sat there, waiting for Takashi to return, for something to happen. The old hospital creaked and groaned around her, the wind howling through the broken windows. Just as she was beginning to lose hope, the door creaked open. Yuki's heart leaped into her throat as she saw Takashi standing there, looking pale and shaken. "Takashi!" she cried, rushing to him and throwing her arms around him. "Where have you been?" He hugged her tightly, his voice trembling. I got lost. This place is like a maze. I'm so sorry, Yuki." They sat together in the dim light, trying to calm their racing hearts. Takashi explained how he had wandered the dark corridors, hearing strange noises and seeing fleeting shadows. It felt as if the hospital was alive, playing tricks on him. They decided to stay together for the rest of the night, too frightened to explore any further. As they huddled together, the sense of dread never left them. The ghostly nurse was out there, watching, waiting. They could feel her presence, a cold, malevolent force that seemed to seep into their very bones. Morning couldn't come soon enough. The first light of dawn filtered through the broken windows, casting long shadows on the floor. Takashi and Yuki packed up their things in silence, both eager to leave this place behind. As they stepped out into the morning light, the old hospital seemed to sigh with relief, as if letting them go. They walked away, never looking back, the memory of the ghostly nurse haunting them for the rest of their lives. The hospital remained a silent sentinel, its dark secrets hidden within its crumbling walls, and the ghostly nurse, forever bound to its halls, continued her eternal vigil, waiting for the next unwary soul to wander into her domain. The sunlight filtering through the broken windows of the abandoned hospital did little to dispel the oppressive atmosphere that lingered within its walls. Takashi and Yuki, though relieved to be outside, couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Their hearts were still racing from the previous night's encounter with the ghostly nurse. Determined to find answers, they decided to visit the local library, hoping to uncover the history of the hospital and the mysterious nurse. The library was a stark contrast to the dilapidated hospital. It was a small, cozy building, filled with the comforting smell of old books and polished wood. The librarian, an elderly woman with kind eyes, welcomed them and guided them to the archive section. Takashi and Yuki spent hours poring over old newspapers and records, piecing together the dark history of the hospital. It was built in the early 1900s, a beacon of hope for the small town. However, tragedy struck when a series of mysterious deaths occurred, all patients in the care of a nurse named Eiko. Eiko was known for her dedication and kindness, but after the deaths, rumors spread that she was involved in dark practices. One night, she disappeared without a trace, and the hospital was shut down soon after. As Takashi read the accounts, a chill ran down his spine. The descriptions of the nurse matched the apparition they had seen. Determined to uncover more, they decided to visit the town's only surviving doctor who had worked at the hospital during that time. Dr. Yamamoto, a frail man in his 90s, lived in a quaint house on the outskirts of town. He welcomed them with a weary smile and listened intently as they recounted their experience. "Ah, Eiko," he sighed, his eyes distant with memory. "She was a good nurse, but something changed in her. She started talking about seeing spirits and hearing voices. We thought she was losing her mind." He paused, his hands trembling slightly. "The night she disappeared, I heard her singing a lullaby. The same one you mentioned. I went to check on her, but she was gone. The patients in her care, They all died under mysterious circumstances. Dr. Yamamoto's words confirmed their fears. The ghostly nurse was indeed Aiko, bound to the hospital by unfinished business. But what could it be? As they left Dr. Yamamoto's house, Takashi and Yuki felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had to find out what Aiko wanted, what was keeping her spirit tied to the hospital. That evening, they returned to the hospital, their hearts heavy with trepidation. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the building. They entered cautiously, their footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. They decided to search Aiko's old quarters, hoping to find some clue. The room was small and sparsely furnished, a stark contrast to the rest of the hospital. A delicate scent of lavender lingered in the air, a faint reminder of the nurse who once lived there. Yuki found an old diary tucked away in a drawer. The pages were yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. As they read through Aiko's words, a tragic story unfolded. Aiko had fallen in love with a patient, a young man named Hiroshi, who was suffering from a terminal illness. Despite her best efforts, Hiroshi passed away, leaving Aiko heartbroken. In her grief, she began to see his spirit, hear his voice. She believed that by helping others transition to the afterlife, she could reunite with him. However, her actions were misunderstood, leading to the rumors and her eventual disappearance. Tears welled up in Yuki's eyes as she read the final entry. "I know they think I'm mad, but I can feel him. Hiroshi is waiting for me. I must help these souls find peace, and then, perhaps, I will find mine." The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Aiko's spirit was trapped, unable to move on because of her unfinished mission. Takashi and Yuki knew what they had to do. They had to help her complete her task, to bring peace to the restless souls within the hospital. As they stood in the darkening room, a soft humming filled the air. It was the same lullaby they had heard the night before. Takashi and Yuki exchanged a determined glance and followed the sound, their hearts pounding in unison. The humming led them back to the surgical ward, where they found the ghostly figure of Aiko, her face serene yet sad. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Help me." Takashi stepped forward, his voice steady. "We will help you, Aiko. Tell us what we need to do." Aiko's spirit flickered, her eyes filled with gratitude. "There are 3 souls who are lost. Help them find peace, and I will be free." With that, she vanished, leaving Takashi and Yuki alone in the cold, dark ward. They knew their task was far from over. The night was just beginning, and the hospital held many secrets yet to be unveiled. Takashi and Yuki steeled themselves for the journey ahead. They had to find the 3 souls and help them find peace to finally release Aiko from her eternal vigil. As they made their way through the hospital, the weight of their mission settled over them, but they were determined. The spectral presence of Aiko had given them a purpose, and they would see it through to the end. The old hospital creaked and groaned around them, the shadows lengthening as night fell once more. Takashi and Yuki moved through the corridors, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. The first soul they encountered was in the old children's ward. A faint sound of laughter led them to a small boy, his ghostly form playing with a ball. Takashi approached slowly, his voice gentle. "Hello, what's your name?" The boy looked up, his eyes wide with innocence. "I'm Kenji. I can't find my mummy. Can you help me?" Yuki's heart ached for the lost child. "We'll help you, Kenji. Let's find your mummy together." They guided Kenji through the hospital, following his memories. As they reached the old maternity ward, a spectral figure of a woman appeared, her face lighting up with joy as she saw Kenji. "Mommy!" Kenji cried, running to her. The 2 spirits embraced, their forms glowing with a soft light before fading away, finally at peace. Takashi and Yuki felt a sense of accomplishment, but knew their task was not yet complete. They continued their search, the weight of the hospital's history pressing down on them. The next soul they found was in the psychiatric ward, a young woman, her eyes filled with fear and confusion. sat in a corner, rocking back and forth. Yuki approached her cautiously. "Hello, can you tell us your name?" The woman looked up, her voice trembling. "I'm Hana. They said I was crazy, but I wasn't. I just wanted to be free." Takashi knelt beside her. "We believe you, Hana. Let us help you find peace." Hana's story was one of tragedy and misunderstanding, her life cut short by a society that didn't understand her. They guided her through the memories of her confinement, helping her find the peace she had been denied in life. As they reached the courtyard, Hana's spirit brightened, and she smiled for the first time. "Thank you," she whispered before vanishing into the night. Takashi and Yuki felt a deep sense of satisfaction, but the final soul still eluded them. The hospital seemed to grow darker, the air heavier with each step they took. Their journey led them to the morgue, a place of cold and silence. There, they found the last soul, a man who had died under mysterious circumstances. His form was twisted with anger and pain, his eyes burning with unresolved fury. Takashi approached him, his voice calm and steady. "We are here to help you. What is your name?" The man glared at them, his voice a harsh whisper. "I am Masaru. They took everything from me. My life, my family, my dignity." Yuki's voice was soft, filled with empathy. "We understand your pain, Masaru. Let us help you find peace." Masaru's journey was the hardest, filled with bitterness and regret. They walked him through his memories, helping him confront the injustice and betrayal he had faced. It was a painful process, but as dawn approached, Masaru's spirit began to soften, his anger dissipating. In the first light of morning, Masaru's spirit finally found peace, fading away with a sense of acceptance. Takashi and Yuki were exhausted, but their mission was complete. The hospital, once filled with restless spirits, was now silent. As they stepped outside, the first rays of sunlight breaking over the horizon, they felt a profound sense of relief. Aiko's spirit appeared before them, her form radiant and free of sorrow. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. "You have given me peace." With that, she vanished, leaving Takashi and Yuki standing in the morning light, their hearts lighter than they had been in days. They knew they would never forget their experience, the haunted hospital, or the ghostly nurse who had guided them. As they walked away, the old hospital stood silent behind them, its secrets finally laid to rest. Their bond, forged in the crucible of fear and determination, was stronger than ever. They had faced the unknown together and emerged victorious. The ghostly nurse, her mission complete, was now at peace, and so were they. The haunting was over, but the memory of that night would stay with them forever, a testament to the power of compassion and the strength of the human spirit. The morning sun cast long shadows over the old hospital. As Takashi and Yuki emerged, their mission seemingly complete, the sense of relief that had initially washed over them began to fade as they walked away from the building. Something felt unfinished. A nagging doubt gnawed at Takashi's mind, and he could see the same unease mirrored in Yuki's eyes. They had helped the spirits of Kenji, Hana, and Masaru find peace, but the weight of the hospital's history still hung heavy in the air. As they walked through the quiet town, a sense of dread crept back into their hearts. The villagers, who had initially been curious about their adventure, now avoided their gaze, whispers following in their wake. Takashi decided to visit the local shrine, hoping to find some solace and clarity. The shrine was nestled in a grove of ancient trees, their branches creating a canopy that filtered the sunlight into a soft, ethereal glow. The air was thick with the scent of pine and incense. Takashi and Yuki approached the shrine's main hall, where an elderly priest was tending to the altar. He greeted them with a knowing look, as if he had been expecting their visit. "You have come seeking answers," he said, his voice calm and measured. Takashi nodded, feeling a sense of reverence in the priest's presence. "We helped the spirits in the hospital, but it doesn't feel like it's over." The priest's eyes, sharp and piercing despite his age, studied them for a moment before he spoke. The hospital holds many secrets. Aiko's spirit is at peace, but there are deeper shadows that linger. He led them to a small room at the back of the shrine, where ancient scrolls and texts were carefully preserved. As the priest unrolled a particularly old scroll, Takashi and Yuki leaned in, eager to understand. The scroll told the story of the land on which the hospital was built, a place once sacred, but desecrated by the construction of the hospital. It was said that the spirits of those who had died unjustly were bound to the land, unable to move on until the site was purified. Takashi's heart sank as he realized the enormity of their task. They hadn't just helped a few restless souls. They were dealing with a curse that had tainted the land for generations. How do we purify the land? Yuki asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The priest's expression grew serious. It will not be easy. You must confront the darkness, head in and cleanse the spirits that are still trapped. Only then will the curse be lifted. Takashi and Yuki exchanged a determined glance. They had come this far, and they couldn't turn back now. The priest gave them a small bundle of sacred herbs and a talisman, instructing them on how to use them to purify the land. As they made their way back to the hospital, the weight of their mission pressed down on them, but they were resolute. The sun was setting by the time they arrived, casting an eerie orange glow over the building. They entered the hospital, their footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. The atmosphere inside was even more oppressive than before, the air thick with a palpable sense of malevolence. Takashi and Yuki moved cautiously through the hospital, the flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. They began the purification ritual, burning the sacred herbs and chanting the prayers the priest had taught them. As the smoke filled the air, the shadows seemed to come alive, swirling and writhing as if in pain. The building creaked and groaned, the very walls seeming to pulse with an ancient rage. In the surgical ward, the heart of the hospital, the air grew colder. A figure emerged from the shadows, a man, his face twisted with anger and sorrow. Takashi and Yuki recognized him from the photographs in the archives. It was Dr. Sato, the head surgeon who had been blamed for the deaths in the hospital. His spirit was bound by guilt and a desperate need for redemption. You think you can purify this place, Doctor? Sato's voice was a harsh whisper, filled with bitterness. You cannot undo the past. Yuki stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. We are here to help you find peace, Doctor. Sato, tell us what happened. The doctor's spirit flickered, his form wavering as if caught between worlds. It was an accident. The patients, they weren't supposed to die. Takashi felt a pang of sympathy for the tormented soul. We believe you. Let us help you. Doctor, Sato's spirit seemed to soften, the anger giving way to sorrow. The experiments, they were meant to heal, but something went wrong. The patients' deaths were covered up, and I was blamed. I couldn't live with the guilt. Yuki nodded, understanding the weight of his confession. You need to forgive yourself, Doctor. Sato, only then can you move on. As they continued the ritual, the shadows around Dr. Sato began to dissipate, his form growing brighter. With a final, shuddering breath, his spirit faded away, leaving behind a sense of calm. The hospital, however, was far from at peace. The ground trembled, and a deep, guttural moan echoed through the corridors. Takashi and Yuki knew they had awakened something ancient and powerful. They pressed on, their determination unwavering. In the basement, they found an old sealed door covered in strange symbols. The air around it was thick with a dark energy, and the temperature dropped sharply as they approached. Takashi took a deep breath and pushed the door open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. In the center of the room was an altar, covered in dust and cobwebs. The source of the hospital's curse was here. The air was suffused with a malevolent presence, a dark force that seemed to feed off their fear. Yuki placed the talisman on the altar and began to chant the final prayer. Takashi joined her, their voices melding together in a harmonious plea for purification. The room shook violently, the walls cracking as the dark energy surged. But they continued, their voices rising above the chaos. The dark force fought back, swirling around them like a storm. But the sacred herbs and the talisman glowed with a powerful light, pushing back the darkness as they reached the climax of the ritual. The dark energy let out a final, ear-piercing scream and exploded into a blinding light. When the light faded, the room was silent. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, replaced by a profound sense of peace. Takashi and Yuki stood there, exhausted but victorious. The hospital, once a place of suffering and torment, was now a place of rest. They made their way out of the building, the morning light breaking over the horizon. The villagers, sensing the change, gathered around them, their faces filled with gratitude and awe. Takashi and Yuki knew they had done something remarkable. They had not only freed the spirits, but had also lifted a curse that had plagued the land for generations. As they left the village, they felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Their bond, strengthened by the trials they had faced together, would endure. They had confronted the darkness and emerged victorious, their spirits as light as the morning breeze. The hospital, now silent and at peace, stood as a testament to their courage and determination. And the ghostly nurse, Aiko, finally at rest, watched over them with a smile, her mission complete. The village was quiet as the first light of dawn began to illuminate the horizon, casting a gentle glow over the landscape. Takashi and Yuki walked through the empty streets, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. Their hearts were heavy with the realization that their journey was not yet over. Despite their efforts, there remained an unsettling feeling that something was left unresolved. As they approached the outskirts of the village, an old man with a weathered face stepped out from the shadows. He was the village elder, a man whose presence commanded respect and reverence. "You have done well," he said, his voice a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to resonate with the very earth beneath their feet. "But there is one final task you must complete." Takashi and Yuki exchanged a glance, a mixture of determination and apprehension in their eyes. The elder led them to an ancient shrine, hidden deep within the forest. The path was overgrown, the trees twisted and gnarled, as if guarding the sacred place from intruders. The air grew colder as they walked, the forest silent, except for the occasional rustle of leaves underfoot. When they reached the shrine, it was clear that it had not been visited in many years. The stone steps were covered in moss, and the wooden torii gate was weathered and cracked. The elder explained that the shrine was the source of the village's spiritual power, but it had been tainted by the same dark energy that had plagued the hospital. To cleanse the shrine and finally lift the curse, they would need to perform a final, powerful ritual. Takashi and Yuki prepared for the ritual, gathering the sacred herbs and talismans they had used before. The elder instructed them in the complex chants and prayers needed to purify the shrine. As they began, the air grew heavy with tension, and a sense of foreboding settled over them. The chanting grew louder, the sacred herbs burning with an intense, purifying flame. The shadows around them seemed to come alive, swirling and writhing as if in agony. The ground shook, and a deep, guttural roar echoed through the forest, the sound of the dark energy fighting back. But Takashi and Yuki did not falter. Their voices rose above the chaos, the power of their conviction, pushing back against the darkness. Suddenly, a figure appeared before them, a spirit that radiated malevolence and sorrow. It was the source of the curse, the embodiment of the dark energy that had plagued the village for generations. "You dare to challenge me?" the spirit hissed, its voice a chilling whisper that cut through the air like a knife. Takashi stepped forward, his voice steady and unwavering. "We are here to end this. Your reign of terror is over." The spirit laughed, a hollow, echoing sound. "You think you can defeat me? I am the darkness within your hearts, the fear that lies in the shadows." Yuki joined Takashi, her voice filled with determination. "We are not afraid of you. We have faced our fears and emerged stronger." The spirit's form flickered, its confidence wavering in the face of their resolve. With a final, powerful chant, Takashi and Yuki focused all their energy on the spirit. The sacred herbs and talismans glowing with a brilliant light, the spirit let out a final, anguished scream as the light enveloped it, dissolving its form into nothingness. The ground stopped shaking, and a profound silence settled over the shrine. The air was clear, the oppressive weight of the dark energy lifted. Takashi and Yuki fell to their knees, exhausted but victorious. The elder approached them, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You have done it. The curse is lifted, and the village is free." As they made their way back to the village, the sun had fully risen, bathing the landscape in a warm, golden light. The villagers greeted them with tears of joy and relief, their faces filled with gratitude. Takashi and Yuki knew that their bond, forged in the crucible of fear and determination, would endure. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, their spirits as light as the morning breeze. The hospital and the shrine, once places of suffering and torment, were now at peace, and the ghostly nurse, Eiko, finally at rest, watched over them with a smile, her mission complete. The village thrived in the following months, the weight of the past lifted from its shoulders. Takashi and Yuki returned to their lives, forever changed by their experiences. They had not only freed the spirits, but had also lifted a curse that had plagued the land for generations. Their story became a legend, a testament to the power of courage and compassion. And though the shadows of the past had been vanquished, they knew that they would always carry the memory of that fateful journey within them. The village, now a place of light and hope, stood as a beacon of resilience and strength, and Takashi and Yuki, bound by their shared experiences, faced the future with a newfound sense of purpose and peace.